for old wheat pennies, for completely different collector stories. One has no mint mark, one carries a Denver D, and every coin hides a clue most people would miss. Before you assume they're just common pennies, watch closely, because one tiny detail could completely change what you think you're holding. Some of the pennies in this video will look completely ordinary, but one tiny detail can separate pocket change money from serious collector attention. And the first mystery begins with a 1925 wheat penny that has no mint mark. Pick up a 1925 Lincoln wheat cent, and the first thing many people do is search beneath the date for a mint mark. If there's nothing there, it can feel suspicious. But here's the first twist. On this coin, no mint mark is exactly what you should expect from a Philadelphia issue. The absence of a letter is not the error. So if the mint mark isn't the secret, what are collectors actually looking for? Start with the surfaces. A massive 139,949,000 cents were struck at Philadelphia in 1925. That means the date itself isn't rare enough to make every example valuable. But surviving in truly exceptional condition, that changes the story. Look closely at Lincoln's portrait, especially the cheek, jaw, hair, and the open field in front of his face. Heavy circulation normally leaves obvious signs behind, where darkening, scratches, contact marks, and flattened details. But an uncirculated example can preserve something entirely different. Sharp detail, original mint luister, and potentially original copper color. That brings us to a detail many beginning collectors overlook: color. With early Lincoln cents, you may hear three descriptions: brown, red-brown, and red. Those differences can matter enormously. The 1925 cent was originally struck from a bronze composition containing 95% copper and 5% tin and zinc. Freshly struck copper has a bright reddish appearance, but after decades of exposure to air, moisture, handling, and storage, that original red color gradually changes. Most old wheat pennies become brown. So when a century-old example survives with strong, natural original red color, collectors begin paying much closer attention. But there's a trap here, and it has ruined plenty of old coins. A bright penny is not automatically an original red penny. Sometimes that shine comes from cleaning. Someone may have polished the coin years ago, dipped it in chemicals, rubbed it with an abrasive, or tried to make an old cent look new again. To an inexperienced eye, that might look better. To a serious collector, it could be exactly the opposite. Cleaning can strip away original surface texture and leave unnatural brightness or tiny hairline scratches. Now turn the coin over. This is the classic wheat cent reverse. 1 cent dominates the center. United States of America appears underneath. E pluribus unum sits across the top. And the two famous wheat ears frame the design. Don't just look at the words. Study the wheat lines. Look at the lettering. Check the highest points for wear. Then examine the open surfaces for marks. This is where grade begins, separating ordinary survivors from remarkable ones. And now comes another useful test. Take out a digital scale. A normal 1925 Philadelphia wheat cent should weigh approximately 3.11 grams. The diameter is about 19 millimeters, and the edge should be plain. Why does weight matter? Because sometimes a strange-looking coin raises questions about its planchet or composition. A slight difference doesn't automatically mean you found an error. Normal wear and scale accuracy can affect the reading. But if the difference is dramatic, that deserves another look. And this is where genuine mint errors enter the investigation. During production, the blank planchet had to be prepared correctly, fed into the press, properly centered between the dies, and struck under enormous pressure. If something went wrong during that process, genuine errors could occur. An off-center strike, a clipped planchet, a broad strike, or another obvious production abnormality. But don't make the mistake of calling every strange mark an error. A scratch isn't a mint error. A dent isn't automatically a mint error. A damaged rim isn't automatically a mint error. The abnormality has to make sense as something created during the minting process. That distinction matters a lot. Now I need to talk about the number that gets everyone's attention. $188,000 plus. If you've seen claims suggesting that an ordinary 1925 no mint mark wheat penny is automatically worth more than $188,000, don't assume that number applies to the coin sitting in your hand. The actual verified auction evidence for the regular Philadelphia issue tells a much more realistic and still fascinating story. An exceptional certified 1925 Philadelphia cent, graded MS 67 plus red, has recorded an auction sale of $6,300. Think about that. $6,300 for one penny. But notice why. Not simply because it says 1925, not because it has no mint mark, and not because someone attached a huge number to it online. Condition: original color, preservation, grade, certification, and collector demand. That's where the real story develops. Think of the value like a ladder. At the bottom, you have ordinary circulated examples. Move higher, and you find cleaner coins with stronger details. Go higher again, and original mint state examples become more desirable. Then you reach coins with beautiful original red surfaces and extremely high certified grades. At the very top, only a tiny number of exceptional survivors may compete for serious collector money. Same year, same penny, completely different market. That's why experienced collectors don't search only for dates. They search for evidence. So if you own a 1925 wheat penny, slow down before deciding what you have. Confirm the missing mint mark. Study Lincoln's cheek and hair. Look for original color. Turn the coin over and inspect the wheat lines. Check the surfaces. Examine the rim. Look at the plain edge. Weigh it. And if something genuinely appears to have been created at the mint, compare it with a normal example before making any conclusions. Most importantly, don't clean it. Don't polish it. Don't scrape it. And don't use chemicals. This penny has already survived for roughly a century. The last thing you want to do is destroy the very surface evidence collectors need to evaluate it. Because the mystery of this first coin isn't really the missing mint mark. It's something much harder to preserve. How well the coin survived. And keep that idea in mind as we continue, because the next valuable clue may be hiding somewhere completely different. Nearly 1 billion of these pennies were struck in 1946. So how could one possibly become a serious collector coin? That's where this penny gets interesting. The 1946 Lincoln wheat penny looks almost too ordinary to deserve a second glance. Lincoln on the front. 2 wheat ears on the back. No mint mark beneath the date. And after the mystery surrounding our first coin, you might assume that missing mint mark is once again the detail to chase. It isn't. A 1946 wheat penny with no mint mark was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, and Philadelphia cents of this period normally carried no mint mark. So there is no missing letter to discover. And that creates a much better question. If Philadelphia produced an enormous 991,655,000 of these cents, why would collectors ever pay serious money for one? The answer begins with survival. Not survival in the sense that the coin still exists. Hundreds of millions were produced. The challenge is finding one that survived decades of circulation, storage, fingerprints, scratches, moisture, handling, and contact with other coins while still looking remarkably close to the way it did when it left the mint. Take a close look at Lincoln. Don't immediately search for some giant dramatic error. First, look at the quality of the coin itself. Study Lincoln's cheek. Move toward his jaw. Then inspect the hair above his ear and the open field in front of his face. On a heavily circulated penny, those areas may show obvious wear and contact marks. But an exceptional mint state example tells a very different story. The details remain sharp. The surfaces retain life. And the coin may preserve much of its original copper appearance. Now look at the date. This date arrived immediately after the extraordinary wartime period that changed the Lincoln cent dramatically. Collectors remember the famous 1943 steel cents because copper was needed for the war effort. By 1946, the cent had returned to a copper base composition. A normal 1946 Philadelphia cent should weigh approximately 3.11 grams. Its diameter is about 19 millimeters, and the edge should be plain. That weight gives you a useful baseline. If you place the coin on an accurate digital scale and get a dramatically different result, don't instantly assume you have discovered a fortune. Test the scale. Weigh the coin again. Compare it with another normal cent of the same general composition. Wear, corrosion, debris, or an inaccurate scale can all mislead you. But when unusual weight appears together with an obvious mint-made abnormality, the investigation becomes much more serious. Now flip the penny over. This reverse is one of the most recognizable designs in American coin collecting. 1 cent sits prominently in the center. United States of America appears beneath it. E pluribus unum runs across the top, and the wheat ears frame both sides of the design. Here's a quick collector test. Instead of staring at the entire reverse, concentrate on the wheat stalks and the lettering. Are the lines crisp? Do the letters remain sharply defined? Is the surface covered with hits and scratches? Or does the coin look unusually clean for something struck 80 years ago? Small differences become important when the grade gets extremely high. And now we reach the part where many online coin stories go wrong. A strange mark does not automatically equal a mint error. If you find doubling around the date or lettering, examine its shape carefully. If you notice an unusual rim, ask whether it could have been damaged after circulation. If a section of the design looks weak, determine whether you're seeing normal where a weak strike, die deterioration, or something genuinely created during production. A real mint error needs a logical minting explanation. Imagine the process. A blank planchet has to enter the coining chamber correctly. It must sit in the proper position. The dies must strike it correctly. The collar must control the coin during the strike. Problems during those stages can create legitimate errors, such as off-center strikes, clipped planchets, broad strikes, or other production abnormalities. But damage caused years later has a completely different story. That difference is where collectors separate curiosity from evidence. And now we can address the number attached to this coin. $142,800 plus. That number is dramatic. But an ordinary 1946 Philadelphia wheat penny should never be presented as automatically worth $142,800 simply because it has the right date and no mint mark. Verified auction evidence gives us a much better reality check. PCGS lists an auction record of $14,950 for a certified 1946 Philadelphia cent, graded MS 67 red. Pause on that for a second. This was a coin from a mintage approaching 1 billion pieces. Yet an extraordinary certified survivor reached nearly $15,000. That is what makes this hobby fascinating. The date alone didn't create that result. The missing mint mark didn't create it. The enormous number of coins originally struck didn't prevent it. The difference came from an exceptional combination of preservation, grade, original appearance, certification, rarity at that quality level, and collector demand. So when you hear a figure like $142,800 plus, treat it as a reason to investigate the exact coin and the exact claim, not as a guaranteed value. The real value ladder starts much lower. First comes the ordinary, circulated 1946 cent. Then cleaner examples. Then uncirculated coins with stronger surfaces. Then exceptionally preserved red examples in very high certified grades. And completely separate from that ladder are genuine major mint errors, which must be authenticated on their own merits. That's why two 1946 pennies can share the same date while belonging in completely different collector conversations. Before you put yours away, perform one final inspection. Confirm there is no mint mark. Look closely at the date. Study Lincoln's portrait. Check the reverse lettering and wheat ears. Examine the rim. Check the plain edge. Measure the weight. And look at the surfaces under good lighting. If something appears genuinely unusual, compare it with a normal example before assigning it a name or a price. And whatever you do, don't try to improve it. No polishing. No abrasive rubbing. No chemicals. No aggressive cleaning. An old copper coin can lose collector appeal very quickly when its original surface is altered. The 1946 Philadelphia wheat penny teaches a completely different lesson from our first coin. Sometimes rarity isn't about how few coins were made. Sometimes the real challenge is finding an extraordinary survivor among an almost unimaginable number of ordinary ones. And the next coin may force us to look for value in an entirely different place. That tiny D under the date looks ordinary, but on the right 1950 wheat penny, the real surprise begins after you stop looking at the mint mark. This is the 1950 D Lincoln wheat penny, struck at the Denver Mint. And unlike the first two coins in this video, there's no mystery about where this one came from. The small d beneath the date tells you immediately. Denver. But here's where collectors can make a costly mistake. They see an old wheat penny with a mint mark and assume the letter itself must be what makes it valuable. For the 1950 D, that simply isn't true. Denver struck an enormous $334,950,000 that year. So finding a 1950 D isn't difficult. Finding an extraordinary 1950 D, that is a completely different challenge. Before we get to the number attached to this coin, look at the mint mark again. Its location matters. The D should appear beneath the date, and on coins from this era, mint marks were added to working dies separately. That makes the area interesting to inspect under magnification. You're not searching for a random scratch that happens to sit beside the D. You're looking for evidence that actually makes sense within the minting process. Unusual die characteristics, displacement, doubling, or another genuine production feature. But here's the first pattern interrupt. Don't spend all your time staring at the D. For many surviving 1950 D cents, the much bigger story is happening across the rest of the coin. Move the light across Lincoln's portrait. Watch the surface rather than just the design. A circulated cent may look brown, flat, marked, and obviously worn. That's normal. These coins were made to circulate. They pass through stores, cash registers, pockets, jars, banks, and countless hands. But imagine one escaping almost all of that abuse. Sharp detail remains in Lincoln's hair. His cheek has very few distracting marks. The fields remain remarkably clean, and the copper surface still shows brilliant original red color. Now you're looking at something far less ordinary. The 1950 D was struck from the traditional bronze cent composition used during this period. Approximately 95% copper with the remaining 5% made from tin and zinc. Its standard weight is about 3.11 grams. Its diameter is approximately 19 millimeters, and the edge is plain. Those numbers might sound like boring technical details, until something doesn't match. Suppose your cent looks normal, but gives an unusual scale reading. That alone doesn't prove anything. Circulation, wear, corrosion, surface deposits, and even scale accuracy can affect a measurement. But numismatics becomes interesting when several clues begin pointing in the same direction. Unusual weight, unusual strike, abnormal planchet, visible production characteristics. That combination deserves much more attention than one strange measurement by itself. Now flip the coin. The familiar wheat reverse appears again. 1 cent in the center, United States of America below it, e pluribus unum above, and wheat ears rising along both sides. Here's where I want you to inspect this coin differently from the previous pennies. Don't begin with the lettering. Begin with the empty fields. Tilt the coin slowly. Large open areas reveal contact marks quickly. A coin can have sharp wheat lines and still fall short of an elite grade because the surfaces are covered in small hits. Then move toward the wheat ears. Check how clearly the fine lines survive. Study the lettering. Look at the overall strike. And finally return to the color. Copper collectors often classify cents as brown, red-brown, or red. As the grade rises, original red color combined with exceptionally clean surfaces can become a major part of the collector equation. And this is where the story of a 1950D suddenly changes. This penny started with hundreds of millions of siblings. Yet PCGS describes examples above MS67 as genuinely scarce, with very few known at those extreme levels. That tells you something important. Mintage is only the beginning of rarity. Condition rarity can create an entirely different market. Now let's bring in real auction evidence. A certified 1950D Lincoln Cent graded MS68 red sold through Heritage Auctions for $20,400 in January 2025. $20,400 for a cent from a mintage of more than 334 million. That is exactly why simply asking, is a 1950D rare, is the wrong question. The better question is, rare in what condition? A War 1950D and an MS68 red 1950D share the same date. They share the same mint. They share the same basic design. But from a collector's perspective, they can occupy completely different worlds. Now we can address your supplied headline figure. $82,700 plus. Could you simply find a normal 1950D in circulation and assume it's worth $82,700? No. There is no responsible reason to assign that amount simply because the coin says 1950 and carries AD. A figure that high would require extraordinary evidence, perhaps an exceptional authenticated mint error, an important recognized variety, an extreme condition rarity, unusual production circumstances, or another feature strong enough to separate that individual coin from ordinary examples. And that distinction is critical. The target number should make you inspect the coin. It should not make you assume the coin. Think of this 1950D as three different collector stories. The first is the common survivor. Old, circulated, recognizable, but not automatically valuable. The second is the condition coin. Sharper surfaces, stronger color, less wear, and increasingly difficult grades. Then there's the third category. The coin that shows something genuinely unusual from production. That's where authentication becomes especially important. A true off-center strike has to show the characteristics of an off-center strike. A clipped planchet has to show evidence consistent with how blanks were punched. True die doubling must behave like doubling created through the die-making process. Random damage does not become valuable simply because it looks strange. So before deciding what your 1950D is worth, build the case one clue at a time. Confirm the D mint mark. Check the date. Study the surface quality. Look at Lincoln's portrait. Rotate the coin under light. Turn it over. Inspect the wheat details and open fields. Check the edge. Verify the weight. And compare anything unusual with a normal 1950D example. Because this coin teaches one of the most important lessons in the entire wheat penny series. Sometimes hundreds of millions can be produced, and the truly exceptional survivors can still become incredibly difficult to find. And after this 1950D, the next coin changes the investigation again. This 1940 wheat penny has no mint mark, but that isn't the mystery. The real clue may be hiding in how unusually perfect the coin survived. By the time we reach this fourth and final coin, you already know one important lesson. An old date alone doesn't create a fortune. And a 1940 Lincoln wheat penny proves that better than almost anything else in this video. Turn the coin toward the light. You'll see Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, the date 1940 beneath him, and no mint mark below the date. That absence is completely normal. This penny came from Philadelphia. Philadelphia was the original United States mint, and since produced there during this period, normally carried no mint mark. So if you were hoping that the missing letter itself was a rare error, that trail ends immediately. But another trail opens. Because Philadelphia struck more than 500 million wheat cents in 1940. Approximately 586.8 million pieces. At first, that sounds like terrible news for rarity. How could a penny produced in numbers that enormous become valuable? Here's where collectors stop counting how many were made and start asking how many survived at the very top. Take a normal circulated 1940 cent. After decades of use, the copper may have turned deep brown. Lincoln's cheek may show friction. The hair detail can become softer. The fields may be covered with small marks. The reverse wheat ears may still be visible, but the entire coin clearly tells you it spent time in circulation. Now compare that with a truly elite survivor. The difference can be dramatic. Sharp strike, minimal marks, strong luster, and brilliant original red copper color. That last detail matters more than many casual collectors realize. A freshly struck bronze cent did not begin life looking dark brown. Its copper-rich surface originally had a much brighter reddish appearance. As time passes, copper naturally reacts with its environment and changes color. That is why collectors commonly describe wheat cents as brown, or red. For an 86-year-old coin, retaining beautiful original red surfaces at an extreme grade can become much harder than simply finding the date itself. And that gives the 1940 cent its first real collector twist. This is not primarily a low mintage story. It is a condition rarity story. Now I'll move closer to the date. Study the shape of the numbers. Then look around Liberty and I in God We Trust. If you notice something that appears doubled, resist the temptation to label it immediately. Collectors distinguish true die doubling from mechanical doubling, where die deterioration and random surface damage. True varieties need characteristics that can be matched to the way a die was created and used. That is why magnification helps, but comparison helps even more. Put a normal 1940 cent beside your coin. Compare the lettering. Compare the date. Compare Lincoln's profile. If the unusual feature appears structured, consistent, and connected to the strike rather than random damage, then you have a reason to investigate further. But there is another test that has nothing to do with magnification. Weight. A standard 1940 wheat cent should come in at approximately 3.11 grams. Its composition is mostly copper, 95%, with the remaining 5% made from tin and zinc. Its diameter is about 19 millimeters. The edge is plain. Those measurements give you a baseline. A small difference in weight can happen for several ordinary reasons. But a dramatic difference, especially when combined with an unusual appearance or planchet characteristic, can raise more interesting questions. Was the blank normal? Was the strike centered correctly? Did the planchet enter the press as intended? Was something unusual happening when the coin was struck? Those are better questions than simply asking whether the penny looks weird. During production, prepared blanks had to feed into the coining press, settle correctly within the striking chamber, and receive the impression from the dies. If something went wrong, legitimate mint errors could occur. A coin might be struck off-center. A planchet could have been clipped before striking. A coin could escape normal collar restraint and show broad strike characteristics. Other striking or planchet errors can also create collectible abnormalities. But the important word is legitimate. A mark made decades after the coin left Philadelphia tells a completely different story from something created during production. Now turn the 1940 cent over. The wheat reverse deserves more than a quick glance. Start at 1 cent. Move outward toward United States of America. Then inspect E pluribus unum at the top. Finally, look at both wheat ears. On a high-quality example, the smaller design details become especially important. But here's the part many people miss. Sometimes the most valuable-looking feature is not a dramatic error at all. It's the absence of problems. Almost no distracting marks. Almost no evidence of circulation. Strong, original color. An unusually sharp overall appearance. That combination becomes increasingly difficult as you approach the highest grades. And we have real auction evidence showing exactly how far that can go. A certified 1940 Philadelphia wheat cent graded MS 68 red has recorded a sale of $14,950, nearly $15,000 for a 1 cent coin. Now compare that with the enormous number attached to this example. $152,000 plus. That figure certainly grabs attention, but it should not be interpreted as the automatic value of a 1940 wheat penny with no mint mark. The date doesn't justify it. The absence of a mint mark doesn't justify it. And an ordinary circulated example certainly doesn't justify it. For a 1940 cent to enter an extraordinary value conversation, there would need to be extraordinary evidence behind that individual coin. An extremely rare authenticated mint error. A major recognized variety. Exceptional provenance. An extraordinary condition rarity. Or another documented characteristic strong enough to move that specific specimen far beyond ordinary examples. That is the difference between a headline and a valuation. The headline gives you a number. The coin has to provide the evidence. And this final penny gives us perhaps the best lesson of the entire video. The 1925 cent taught us not to mistake a missing mint mark for rarity. The 1946 penny showed how an enormous mintage can still produce important condition rarities. The 1950 D forced us to look beyond the mint mark itself. And now the 1940 penny brings everything together. Date, mint, strike, weight, surface quality, color, grade, errors, certification, and evidence. One detail rarely tells the entire story. It is the combination that matters. So if a 1940 wheat penny turns up in an old jar, inherited collection, desk drawer, or forgotten roll, give it more than a 2-second glance. Look at the date. Confirm the Philadelphia issue. Inspect Lincoln's portrait. Rotate the surfaces beneath good light. Study the wheat reverse. Check the weight. Compare suspicious characteristics with a normal example. And most importantly, ask the question that serious collectors ask. What makes this particular coin different from the hundreds of millions struck beside it? Because among common-looking coins, extraordinary value doesn't come from simply being old. It comes from being extraordinarily different. And that is exactly why every wheat penny deserves an inspection before you decide what you really have.